Good morning from WKYT News. I'm Bill Bryant. We hope you're enjoying your wintry weekend, and we welcome you to Kentucky Newsmakers. Our guest this morning is Central Kentucky Congressman Andy Barr, who filed this week for a fourth term in Washington. He's running for re-election. As Barr heads back to the Capitol this coming week, he knows it's going to be a busy year ahead. The economy is picking up. Republicans say it's their policies that are pushing things in the right direction. The Republicans are celebrating passage of a tax bill that also repealed the federal health insurance mandate under Obamacare. That bill also contained a provision that, unless something gives, will be detrimental to Berea College by taxing the endowment of work colleges, that one that serves needy students. Congressman Barr has promised to work on that. We'll discuss how that all happened, and it's been a source of a blame game. Barr says he is also focused on Kentucky's opioid epidemic and is carefully watching situations around the world, including North Korea. 6th District Republican Congressman Andy Barr joining us for Kentucky Newsmakers. And hope you had nice holidays.
I did. Thank you. Hope you did as well.
Thank you. Well, let's get right to the tax cut bill, the last action taken before Congress went on recess. It was passed with only Republican support in both chambers. Democrats now point to a potential ballooning of the deficit that the GOP railed against for many years. Do you believe that the economic growth from this will erase the revenue losses of the tax cut?
Well, yes, and this is a historic change in the federal tax code, and it's needed. This is a generational, transformational piece of legislation. The first time we've been able to comprehensively reform the federal tax code in 31 years. And this legislation will not only allow hardworking Americans to keep more of their income, it's also going to grow paychecks, and it's going to make American businesses much more competitive by lowering the corporate tax rate, which was the highest in the industrialized world, moving to a territorial tax system to prevent these corporate inversions, allow investment to be repatriated back to the United States and invest. And, you know, this point about not only people being able to take home more of what they've earned in the form of lower taxes, and we know that to be the case for middle income, low income Americans because of the doubling of the standard deduction and the doubling of the child tax credit. But it's also about growing paychecks. And we've seen a wave of corporate announcements just over the last 2 weeks since this bill was signed into law, of bonuses, of raises, of increased 401k contributions and enhanced benefits. So this is a jolt to the American economy. It's going to make America more competitive, more economically vibrant, and the result is that we're going to see more economic growth. And the estimates are, and we've had, look, over the last decade, substandard growth. We haven't seen sustained growth over 2% on average over the last 8 years. And what this does is puts us in a position to have economic growth of over 3.5%, 4%. And we watched this as chairman of the Monetary Policy and Trade Subcommittee in talking to Fed officials about their projections for economic growth. And you saw the release of the minutes, the Fed minutes this week, and they're projecting a lot more growth as a result of this. And the economists who look at this, they say that if we grow on average, if the American economy grows on average of greater than 2.6% gross domestic product on average over the next decade, the tax cuts are totally paid for. Now, we're not going to rely on that. We need spending restraint. But it is hypocritical for these critics of this tax bill, whose policies caused a doubling of the national debt, to now suddenly, all of a sudden, have this epiphany about their concern about deficits. The only way we're ever going to balance the federal budget is not just through spending restraint, but robust economic growth. And if we grow at over 2.6% over the next decade, even accounting for a mild recession, the tax cuts are totally paid for.
What are you saying to people out there who say that, and you have mentioned there will be benefits to companies and there are benefits to the rich, that this was an act that was designed for the rich?
Well, first of all, look at the actual facts. Look at actually what we do in the bill. We double the standard deduction, meaning if you're a married couple filing jointly in central Kentucky, the first $24,000 of your income is completely tax-free. And then if you have kids, we double the child tax credit. And we increase the bracket thresholds and lower the rates all throughout the tax code. So this is an unmistakable tax cut and a simplification and a fairer tax code for every American in all walks of life. And if you actually look at the analysis of the tax bill, not the rhetoric from the left, not the class warfare and class envy rhetoric from the left, but actually look at what the tax bill does. In Central Kentucky, the median household family income family will see a $2,052 tax cut. Now, we asked our constituents, what would you do with an additional $2,000? Some would say, well, we'd pay down a credit card. We would save more for college. We'd save for more retirement. We'd get a chance to take a breather, have a little bit more financial peace of mind, and get a chance to go out to dinner and maybe see a movie that we wouldn't be able to do under the current tax code. And you know, one of my constituents, Gary from Lexington, he gave the best answer of all. He said, it doesn't matter what I do with this additional $2,000. It's my money. And let me choose what I'm going to do with it. I can make decisions for myself. And that's really true. This money, Bill, is going to be spent. The question is, do you want liberal politicians in Washington and bureaucrats to spend this money? Or do you want this money to stay in the pockets of the people of Central and Eastern Kentucky so that they can spend it and direct it for them and their families? And I chose the latter, and that's why I'm very proud to have supported this growth-producing tax cut.
Congressman, I know there was one part of it that you don't like, but you voted for the overall act anyway. The Berea College issue, multi-sided. You told me that you spotted that issue coming and worked on it early. But some, Berea College supporters say anybody who voted for the bill for that provision to levy this tax on their endowment has hurt that work school.
Well, first of all, Berea College is a gem in the 6th Congressional District and frankly in the country. It's a one of a kind. It is a work-study college that provides tuition-free education mainly for kids from Appalachia, first in their family, first in a generation to attend college. It is the epitome of the American dream. And when we heard that this proposed excise tax was inadvertently applying to these work-study colleges that provide tuition-free education for disadvantaged kids, we immediately took action. Dr. Lyle Rulofs, the president and outstanding leader of Berea College, contacted our office, alerted us to this problem. We immediately got Dr. Rulofs a call with the staff of the Ways and Means Committee, the staff that handles higher education tax policy. We made the case, I made the case, Dr. Rulofs made the case to the staff. I immediately went to House leadership about this. I had multiple conversations with Kevin Brady, the congressman who chairs the Ways and Means Committee, and he agreed with me. He said this was an oversight, a mistake. Kevin McCarthy, the House Majority Leader, said that this was never the intention. In fact, the intention of the excise tax was to target universities with very healthy endowments who have high tuition.
The Harvards, the Yales, and so forth.
The Yales, the Princetons, and the goal was to lower tuition or incentivize them to use these healthy endowments to lower tuition. So when I explained that Berea College provides tuition-free education, Berea is fulfilling the whole policy purpose.
So why did it not get changed in time for a final passage?
So what we did is we secured a commitment from Chairman Brady to exempt Berea College and other work-study colleges. He agreed to do that. He fulfilled his commitment, and Senator McConnell worked very hard and did a great job on the Senate side, and in the conference report, the problem was fixed. We solved it. We had an exemption in the final bill, and I voted for the bill with the exemption that protected Berea College. But the problem was at the very last minute, after no complaints about our fix, Senator Bernie Sanders in the Senate yanked it out using a procedural tool, frankly, I think politically motivated to embarrass Senator McConnell and poke his eye. And the result was, at the very last minute, Senate Democrats killed our fix for Berea College. So obviously, I had to go back to our leadership and to Chairman Brady, and we secured another commitment that as soon as we get back in January, we are going to fix this in the tax extenders or another appropriate legislative vehicle as soon as possible so that Berea College does not face a higher tax bill. This is a big deal because it's a potentially $1.3 million hit to Berea's bottom line. I've got a commitment from House leadership that we're going to fix this problem. I'm confident that we will fix this problem. Senator McConnell is on top of it. We're on top of it. And we've kept Dr. Roloff's engaged, and he's expressed appreciation for our commitment to making this right for Berea.
The individual mandate is removed in this tax provision, tax law under Obamacare. It's estimated that several million Americans will drop health insurance as a result of this. You have said it's a good thing because, again, it is their decision. But do we return to the years when the uninsured show up in the emergency room and they get free health care, and then it's all shifted over to everybody else anyway?
No, no. After years of skyrocketing costs as a result of Obamacare, what we did in this bill is we made sure that Kentuckians and other Americans will no longer face a punitive tax penalty simply because they voluntarily chose not to purchase health insurance, Obamacare health insurance that they don't want and that they cannot afford. This is about giving the American people freedom from a coercive federal government. And look, if Americans want to buy the Obamacare policies under our new tax plan, they can. Nothing prevents them from buying or purchasing Obamacare mandated policies. But we simply say to that family that looks at the options and says, you know what, this policy doesn't help me. It's too expensive. It doesn't cover my doctor. It doesn't cover hospitals near my area. I really don't think this health plan is going to help me and my family. We allow that person to make that choice without imposing a punitive tax on that family. We still need a lot of work on the health insurance situation in this country. Obamacare has forced health plans to increase rates. So what we need to return to this. These problems are not going away.
Do you think
the exchanges are still collapsing?
If 13 million people drop it, and that's the estimate, drop health care coverage, do you believe that if the costs are brought down, that then many of those will rejoin the market?
Well, what we need to do is pass reforms like we passed last summer that actually, instead of punishing people who can't afford health insurance, do what we propose to do, which is give them a refundable tax credit. So that if you're a self-employed person or you work for a business that can't afford to provide a group plan for you, that you can go on the individual market, and it may be expensive because either you have a pre-existing condition or you're in the individual market, which is naturally more expensive, and we would give you a refundable tax credit to lower your premium. We think that's a better way of helping people who are uninsured, is to say, instead of punishing you with a tax bill because you can't afford health insurance, why don't we actually give them a tax credit that makes it easier for them to afford health insurance? Let's do what many in Congress are proposing to do, and which I voted to do, which is to allow for greater participation in association health plans so that people can achieve the purchasing power of large self-funded employer-provided health insurance.
Well,
there's lots of good solutions out there.
Congressman Andy Barr is with us on WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. Many more questions, including about his run for re-election. We're coming back in a moment. We welcome you back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers, and Congressman Andy Barr is with us today, and he has enjoyed the holidays and has filed for re-election. You signed on the dotted line this week, hoping for a fourth term in Washington.
I did, and you know what, as much progress as we've made, both in terms of the tax cuts and in terms of the regulatory relief that we've delivered, there's still more work to be done. On the regulatory relief front, I think a lot of the run-up in the stock market, the 35% appreciation in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, which is the biggest jump, post-election jump in the stock market in 70 years. I think a lot of that is attributable to the business climate in this country getting better. The signals that we've sent from Washington, from Congress, and from this administration that we're going to roll back Obama-era regulations. We've passed 15 regulatory relief bills, 16 actually we voted on, 15 have been signed into law that will result in $3.7 billion in savings. We voted for several other regulatory relief measures and passed them that would require Congress to approve regulations and that would require agencies to adopt the least costly regulatory alternative. That has sent a signal to employers, job creators, entrepreneurs, Main Street businesses that they're no longer going to get harassed from Washington. And that has resulted in a stronger economy. We want to continue that work so that we can give Kentuckians upward mobility once again.
Congressman, do you commit, though, to keeping a close eye on the results of eliminating some rules about safety and pollution and financial matters and other things that obviously were put in place because of major concerns at the time?
Well, you know, look at, for example, in the jurisdiction of my committee, the Financial Services Committee. Everyone knows that I've been a champion for community financial institutions, community banks, credit unions, right here in Central and Eastern Kentucky. I make no apologies for that. These institutions are the lifeblood of our local economy. They supply credit to homeowners. They supply capital to small businesses and entrepreneurs that create jobs and opportunity for our people here, for farmers so that they can be prosperous and provide and put food on our tables. I make no apologies for that. And if you think about it, community banks, community financial institutions, credit unions, they've been suffocated by the avalanche of red tape from Washington, and they are the antidote. They are the solution to too big to fail Wall Street banks. I am very optimistic. You say, what are we looking forward to achieving? I'm looking forward in this year passing a bipartisan community financial institution regulatory relief bill that will liberate local economies and help unclog the plumbing of our economy. And again, that will actually enhance financial stability, because over-regulation has actually undermined financial stability because it's made big banks bigger and small banks fewer.
Can Congress get much done in an election year? Isn't it very tough when you have both parties, digging in and frankly trying to embarrass the other party with basically every piece of legislation that comes out? Well,
that's conventional wisdom, but that's not the way I operate. I attend a bipartisan breakfast every single week in Washington, and I have friends on the other side of the aisle. I worked with a Democrat on delivering regulatory relief for rural communities so that people in Central and Eastern Kentucky could more easily access financing for manufactured homes. I worked with Congresswoman Kyrsten Sinema on that. She's from Arizona. She's a Democrat. I think we can do bipartisan things. Look at the prospect for infrastructure in this country in 2018. This is one of President Trump's top priorities. We need it. We have crumbling infrastructure. Making America great again is not just about tax cuts and regulatory relief. It's about rebuilding our infrastructure, and I think we can do that in a bipartisan way.
What do you see in your district that you'd like to see done from an infrastructural standpoint?
We have so many needs, and I would start with the Brent Spence Bridge. It's not in my district. It's the bridge that runs over Cincinnati in northern Kentucky, but it is a huge artery of commerce for central Kentucky. I-75, it's very important. And I think also you look at all of our rural infrastructure, look at the water and wastewater needs in the eastern counties of my district, very critically important. I think we need to do more work in terms of Lexington. There's a lot of opportunity for infrastructure in Lexington. And, I supported the Tiger Grant for the Town Branch project, which can revitalize our distillery district, for example. You look at all of that opportunity that we have for infrastructure to revitalize our economy. We've been working on it, and I think we can achieve some of those things in a bipartisan way.
Congressman, this opioid crisis shows few signs of letting up. Calls for overdoses were up 24% in Madison County last year. Lexington EMS crews say they are now responding and administering Narcan an average of 7 times a day. And it's up this first week of the new year, by the way. Kentucky prisons are more and more full of women who are going to prison and are not getting treatment, but instead are going to prison. Are we handling this correctly?
It's heartbreaking. The president invited me and Chairman Rogers to attend his announcement in the East Room of the White House, announcing and declaring a national public health emergency on opioid addiction. The president and the vice president invited us to a lunch with members of Congress who represent districts like mine, states, Commonwealth of Kentucky, which suffers from the 3rd highest drug overdose mortality rate in the country, to offer solutions to the administration. And I have offered solutions. And the 3 things that I've really pushed the administration to focus on is, number 1, let's do a better job training our prescribers, our physicians. I'm working with an anesthesiologist in Kentucky on enhanced recovery after surgery, particularly in the orthopedic context, to avoid narcotics, to avoid patients getting addicted to pain pills. We also recommended enhanced funding for HIDA, the High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program. And I was able to offer an amendment that passed the House of Representatives that increased the budget, increased funding for the HIDA program so that we can get more federal DEA law enforcement help to our rural communities and our communities here in central and eastern Kentucky. And finally, I've been a champion for more federal resources for transitional housing. And I've had multiple conversations with Secretary Ben Carson, the Secretary of the Department of Housing and Urban Development. HUD is under the jurisdiction of my subcommittee. There are terrific organizations, not-for-profit organizations, Recovery Kentucky, St. James Place, Revive in Nicholasville. We have a wonderful outfit called Shepherd's House. These organizations are making progress, but they need funds. Chrysalis House, we were able to secure a $2.6 million grant for Chrysalis House for women and babies right here in central Kentucky. We need more transitional housing for addiction recovery, and we are not going to stop until we make a big dent in this big problem.
Well, it's an overwhelming problem, no doubt. You pushed hard for sanctions against North Korea, given the aggressions and concerns there. Now it appears that North Korea and South Korea will have a meeting, and there's some talk now of potentially the North taking part in the Winter Olympics that are coming up. Is that encouraging?
It's very encouraging, and I think it's a direct result of the shift away from the failed policy of strategic patience of the last several years. And what you've seen is a shift both in congressional policy and administration policy to get tougher on North Korea. Frankly, I think the administration needs to get even tougher than they have. And that's why I introduced a bill that passed the House by 415 votes. You talk about bipartisan support of a bill that I introduced, the Otto Warmbier North Korea Nuclear Sanctions Act. This would impose the toughest economic sanctions ever imposed on Pyongyang. And it would target foreign enablers of the Kim regime. It would target Chinese and Russian banks and Malaysian banks that facilitate illicit financing of their nuclear program. And I think that bill has passed the House. It's in the Senate. And I think we need to continue to push the administration to go after these Chinese banks that allow North Korea to circumvent the primary sanctions that we've already imposed on them. I think those sanctions, those activities, that pressure is having results. And ultimately, that's what we want, a peaceful denuclearization of the North Korean
Congressman
regime.
Andy Barr is with us. Our remaining moments with him on Kentucky Newsmakers coming right up. Welcome back to WKYT's Kentucky Newsmakers. We're visiting with Republican Congressman Andy Barr, who has now filed for re-election. The Democrats are going to come at you hard. There's no question about that. Lexington Mayor Jim Gray, retired fighter pilot Amy McGrath, State Senator Reggie Thomas, and others will fight it out in a primary, and whoever emerges will likely be well funded because the National Democrats want this seat. And Gray has proven he'll spend his own money in the race. How do you size up the opposition?
Well, I'm a Republican, and Republicans love competition. Competition is a good thing. I embrace competition. I think competition makes us all better. And so I think it's a good thing. And I think that's kind of in keeping with James Madison's original vision of the House of Representatives of running every 2 years. You know, I think what we're seeing here is the left in America today energized and agitated because they're still smarting over last year's election. They're very disappointed, and they're upset about the election of Donald Trump.
But are you concerned? You know, they've been winning lately. They picked up the Senate seat in Alabama, a red state. They won the governorship in Virginia. They picked up legislative seats there and elsewhere. You know, I'm not worried because the people of central and eastern Kentucky have voted for this agenda 3 consecutive elections, and in the last 2 in landslide elections. And we've made promises about cutting taxes. We made promises about rolling back costly regulations. We've made promises about doing the things that we're doing. And I believe that if you do the job you're elected to do, if you're in the business of keeping your promises, which we have been, if you are dedicated to outstanding constituent service and accessibility, those things that my great staff does each and every day, then I think the politics will take care of itself. And so, you know, we're not focused on
the big fight, the internal dissension and conflict within the Democratic Party right now. We're focused on doing the job we were elected to do and delivering on our promises.
You were once the charging challenger, and now you're an incumbent seeking your fourth term. Do you get concerned about the drama surrounding what's going on in Frankfurt and Washington, just coming to another tipping point where people say, well, let's just throw them all out?
You know what? No, because I'm a reformer. I ran as a reformer. I ran to drain the swamp. I ran to hold Washington accountable, and that's exactly what I've been doing. And so if anybody's concerned about throwing out a career politician, I'm not worried about that, because I've been the one fighting Washington. I've been the one reforming Washington. And we're going to continue to do that. And we've made a lot of progress in holding Washington accountable, and we want to continue to do that.
Is it hard to run every 2 years from the House?
Again, I kind of like competition. It energizes me. It makes me a better legislator. And I'll tell you why. Because it forces those of us to actually stay in touch with our constituents. And that's the favorite part of my job, is to go travel these 19 counties and listen to my constituents' struggles, their challenges, to listen to their hopes and aspirations, and then focus on that. And that makes me a better policymaker, because I have anecdotes of how these tax cuts are going to help the single mom with 2 kids. I have anecdotes about how someone was denied a loan for a manufactured home, and they've been denied the American dream because of bureaucrats in Washington. That makes me a better legislator. It makes me advocate for the people of this district in a more personal and effective way.
Congressman Barr, thank you for coming. Appreciate it very much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of Kentucky Newsmakers. We'll see you bright and early this week on WKYT This Morning. We start early at 4:30, so we're up when you're up, and you make it a great week ahead.